Welcome, Left Reckoners, on this Sunday. I'm Matt Leck. With me as ever, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, brother. Little preview for folks, by the way, too. We got some new merch coming in. This sweatshirt's very nice.
As somebody with a drafty apartment, I am looking forward to getting that long sleeve crew neck that looks very comfortable for this sort of temperature.
So keep y'all's eye out. Hopefully we'll get these up and running by next week for folks who are interested in it.
That's awesome.
And we also have a cool t-shirt coming out as well as all the classics, as we all know.
Also, we got some camo.
We're trying some camo out. We'll get that. I have to finish that design, but we'll get that moving soon.
We're trying. I see this more and more, this trend that it looks like the type of gear. And it's funny to me as somebody who grew up hunting. Mm-hmm. When you come back to town from like a pheasant hunt or a deer hunt and you're wearing like the real tree camo, I always felt very that hunting world and my social world didn't cross. I didn't have a lot of friends that hunted, so I never felt like that. I always felt a little bit like embarrassed to be seen wearing like a vest for like turkey hunting or something like that.
It's like wearing work clothes in public, you know what I mean?
Kind of that sort of thing. Yeah, it's like because just my dad was like, to the extent my friends hunted, it was with my dad as like they would come with us because he was.
People in your high school and stuff, people didn't wear like camo jackets and things like that. That was always a status symbol for me growing up. Yeah, that's funny.
No, that's the thing is like it was more like the people who would do that were the more country boys. And the farm kids would do that, but the city slickers, suburban kids, it was all like basketball jerseys and stuff like that. It's very funny. So now to see like very high fashion people in that exact same like heavy camo,
seeing it in Brooklyn is like always gonna be very funny. Right,
it's so ridiculous. It's like seeing a F-250 in Brooklyn. It's like, what is?
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you need that for a job, like I don't understand what's going on here. And you definitely don't need camouflage for any kind of job in New York.
Unless it's like the gray, which is very psycho, like the cityscape camo. Have you ever seen any of that before?
Urban camo.
It's a very dark thought process behind that.
Yeah, we need to blend in with rubble. I mean, actually, that kind of sets the table pretty well here. I've been watching a lot of debates and reading a lot of stuff. Norm Finkelstein apparently has been in contact with Destiny's team. Destiny is, of course, a streamer who I don't think much of. Michael debated him.
Did he really?
Michael debated him about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and Destiny was in support of the investor-state dispute system. So, you know,
God, that guy is, yeah. Anyway,
what's funny is to watch him do like stream preparation, and it's like I'm reading, and the thing is, he doesn't actually read books, and he's just monetizing.
Have you seen this? To maybe introduce him, if you don't mind, Matt. Because I will admit, I don't really know him too much as a figure. Like I've seen his stuff around there, and I have to admit, I do ignore most of that. What has been weird is like, you know, he'll be interviewing or like on camera with somebody like a Zizek, which I found to be absolutely bizarre. But for people who don't know who this guy is and sort of the rigor that comes into their work, I think this is a pretty good kind of super clip that was put together. I'll give it attribution in just a second of this guy, you know, utilizing the full expanse of his mind.
I don't know who Franco is, but he must be a fucking.
You don't know Francisco Franco?
He's got $2 supporters.
Bruh.
$2 supporters. Bashar al-Assad, is that this guy? No.
Oh, jeez. It's Erdogan.
Who are these people? Fuck. Am I just supposed to know? This isn't him. Oh, Erdogan. Erdogan. Is it Erdogan? Erdogan? I don't know if fuck to pronounce this guy's name. When did he become?
Did you also? Let's be clear there too. He ends by saying, "When did he become president of Israel?"
Erdogan. Catch
that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Not Arabic or whatever, or
no? They're written in Koine Greek.
What was the Jewish fucking old shit?
Well, Hebrew. There was some Aramaic in the Old Testament as well.
Okay, or make a change.
Yeah, but mostly.
Jesus,
Yeah.
that's talking about
This
Richard
one's
Spencer.
amazing.
Okay.
I've seen this one.
Okay. Not too bad.
Bro, so just to let people know who are just listening, he did this United States 50 rap quiz, and what is that, 64%?
Pretty rough.
I'll say I did that when this happened, and I got 100% in under 3 minutes. And
easy.
I didn't break. I thought like maybe I'd break a sweat around New Hampshire and Vermont, but no, I remember Vermont's closer to New York because of the Hudson, and like that is, what did he get wrong? He got Kentucky wrong. He got Indiana wrong. To be fair, Mississippi, Alabama, as somebody from the Midwest, like I could understand, but I still think you got to know which. Man,
especially to be doing what you're doing. If your whole thing is that like you are a guy who has like a deep understanding of not just this country but the world. I mean, the point of this is sort of expose this as a guy who talks a lot without knowing much. We have to see, because there's another map that's coming up here in a second, Matt, that I think might sort of explain why he might be avoiding Norm Finkelstein.
Yeah.
Do Europe, bro? I don't even know half the countries in Europe. Okay. Denmark really owns this? That's so wild. Why? Honestly, I'm pro genocide. Like it sounds really shitty, but like I think that
we've seen that. I don't want to hear that thing again.
Well, that's the thing is though. He's
This is it. Sorry, just watch this for a second. This is after a guy very proudly saying that he thinks that Palestinians should be exterminated, and giggling about it.
This whole thing.
This is him trying to talk about the region that he's obsessed with.
The light green is Palestine. Wait, what light green? Oh wait, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong area.
Bro.
Oh,
wait, it gets worse. Oh yeah, why don't you zoom in on the Balkans? Yeah.
Oh my god.
So anyway, I know that was a little bit of a detour, but it's just we should remember, and that's Queen in yellow on Twitter, Gato Fumidor.
I'm very happy to have. I don't know to what extent, because I don't think I just joined the chorus. I of course didn't start this, but the Destiny can't read thing, and to have an actual person, you're going to have these sort of debates. You're going to squat this world issue for the attention that it draws to you, because you want to busk for it and you want to shake the can and try to get some people to throw in some. It's disgusting, and he's doing it now. It's like, okay, I need to prepare for Norm Finkelstein, and he's streaming his own preparation. It's like I watched the interview with I think it was with Katie Halper, I think, and Norm's like, I'm very upset because of what Bernie said, because it took me out of my reading, because I know what Norm's doing to a lesser extent. Obviously, Norm has been doing this for decades longer than I've lived, but like, you should be spending more time off of camera, not monetizing something, learning about something before you get on camera and start saying, actually, you know what? Genocide seems to be it. It seems to be the vibe. And that's really, I think disgusting. So I can't wait for that. Destiny seems to be delaying a little bit. Maybe they should have just had Norm.
Avoiding, frankly.
Norm's handlers should have just called into have him call into one of his live streams with zero prep, because I think that probably would have been pretty damaging. But also on the Norm front, he talked with just to update on folks, Candace Owens, and I must say I maintain the reservations that we expressed about Candace Owens and the route that she is likely to take on this. But I will say, Norm did a really good job on that program. It seemed a little bit tailored to Candace. He leaned heavily onto appealing to her as a mother, which I haven't seen him do with other people. But ultimately, I think Candace tried to push back on certain things, but Norm really played this moment well, because with his memoir, which personally, like I might get to now, the cancel culture stuff didn't super interest me, but I can tell you it really has paid dividends here, because you see someone like Candace Owens who's listening to Norm Finkelstein talk, and what does she know? She knows he's supports Palestine not being, murdered. And also he's anti-woke. And there's a moment in the Candace Owens conversation where Norm's going through Hamas and their political history. And he says, back in 2006, Hillary Clinton, and you can just see Hillary Clinton wanted to fix the election. The election that Hamas won, Hillary Clinton is on record trying to fix it. And that little that little thing, I don't know if Candace is salvageable, but I do think reaching that audience, there's not a comment on Rumble that says Norm is a terrorist supporter. It was all, and then look, there was also anti-Semitic Christ is King weird stuff going on in there. But ultimately, look, you get what you can, and I really appreciated Norm's conversation both with Candace Owens and Michaela Peterson was even more crazy because it was just wild. She just gave him the floor for an hour.
Well, I'll tell you, just kind of superficially, the best thing about the Norm bit with Candace Owens is if you watch it, they played the crocodile tears video, which I'm sure everyone's seen
out front.
Which set him up really well, I think, for that crowd. And then in his intro, he's just I'm not coming from this from a place of emotion. I'm not emotional about this. I'm just coming here from facts and logic, and the facts direct me to be this way. If the facts were different, I would feel differently about this. And I'm just I don't know if that's just Norm's style generally, or if he's sort of been coached that hey, with this audience, if you say that I'm neutral and just led by the facts, they're going to gobble up whatever you say. So it was a good appearance for sure.
No, there were several things that seemed to be either by coaching or really good instinct. And that was one of those, I forget. There's another example. Oh, there's one where he's I don't know any of your work, Candace, but I'm not very online, but I know that you would never, because she's do you think that Jewish people should have a basically Jewish, she doesn't put it like this, but a Jewish exclusive state? And Norm says, or a state exclusive, in a Jewish supremacist state. And Norm says, I don't know about anything about you, Candace, but I'm very certain that you would not endorse a white supremacist project anywhere. And I don't know if that is in relation to her Hitler stuff, which comes up if you Google her, or if it's, but the way he emphasized it was very funny. And Candace just has to be no, I would hate. Oh, and then also, I thought a point to drive home the point about that has has been cynically been coded as pro-terrorist, which is to say that this didn't start on October 7th. And Finkelstein brings out his Nat Turner discussion, which is to say no one's defending the specific acts on that day, but also nobody thinks that we should just start telling that story of Nat Turner decided to do this one day and not in the context of slavery. That's just a fairly a mature brained point, but that so many people need to have access to. But it's interesting to hear Candace Owens have to receive a sort of, because she's that sort of slavery is lives with us and informs our view of this sort of thing is not usually Candace's bag, but Norm gave it to her anyway. So I thought that was great, and I look forward to the Destiny discussion. Destiny's going to try 8 different ways of having Norm Finkelstein apologize for Hamas, I think is probably going to be the strategy. And I think that Norm's going to do a good job.
I'm sure. I mean, that's the thing that's exhausting about all these guys is the same, 2 tricks. It's just trying to derail the conversation to talk about Hamas, and again, that has any frankly relevance at all if the question that's being debated is Palestinians deserve human rights and and life, right? Any kind of thing that you were counter argument actually, that's insane. To try to push back on. And then 2, the other kind of new one is getting worked up about if it wasn't to be Israel doing it, it would be the Muslims doing it to Israel, which is then one is a good way to derail the conversation, and 2, so what you're saying right here is somebody's got to kill somebody, and I'm picking sides, which is a pretty fucking nasty thing to be saying as well.
Exactly, and ahistorical, and ahistorical,
100%.
right? Like there's documentation now. There's a book, State of Terror. I think the author's name is Tom Suarez, but it goes into not only the terror inflicted on the Palestinian community to get them to flee, but also Jewish communities, among which Avi Shlaim, the historian, was a part in Baghdad, of bombs set by Zionists to make Jews feel unsafe and flee to Israel. Like it very much, and look, so we can condemn terrorism, but we should, but like, there's one condemnation. What does it mean to condemn, right? Like, am I condemning Hamas? Like, I can condemn them to be like on the lower tiers of my resistance tier listing when I have the ANC up high, whatever. Like, what is that? Or is it to condemn their resistance of the structure that, you know, has basically produced them as a form of resistance? And I think like that's like when we talk about condemnation, it really depends on who you're talking about and what you're talking about. And so maybe we should move into this. Like, I want to play this. Jeremy Corbyn, a little bit of this Piers Morgan, Jeremy Corbyn thing. And I prefer doing this on the post game for everybody, because I think this is a more sensitive conversation than one that like I think is super helpful in trying to get a ceasefire. But just look at the way Corbyn's treated here.
Mine, and I keep asking you the same question. Would you keep Hamas in power?
What I said was there has to be a ceasefire. A ceasefire has to be both sides. That ceasefire will then hopefully develop into a longer-term peace.
What, you think Israel can do?
Hang on a minute.
You think Israel can do peace with Hamas?
Israel has been talking to Hamas for 20 years.
You think they can do peace with them after October the 7th?
They've been listen, October the 7th was abominable and appalling. That we're agreeing.
And you think Israel can do peace with people that did that?
I managed to get 2 sentences in between.
Because you won't answer my question.
Look, if you want to have a discussion, fine.
Answer my question.
If you want to just shout at me, that's your prerogative,
Hamas,
your TV, your show.
Should Hamas stay in power?
So just to phrase, like, it's not actually just one question that belligerent phone hacking asshole is trying to ask Corbyn there. He wants to say reductively, is Hamas a terror group? Yes or no? And should they stay in power? Yes or no? To take the latter question, that is a very, like, that's actually the whole point of why we're here, is we look at these as like, we get to decide these sorts of issues. And I want to model for folks what an adult conversation about Hamas looks like. And it's this guy, I'm interested, Indian journalist, maybe Indian British, Karen Thapar. He has a show called The Wire that he had a Hamas spokesperson on yesterday, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But here he is with Avi Shlaim a couple weeks ago, and Avi Shlaim, and to be fair, like, Thapar asked that question, but gives Shlaim a little bit of respect that he can answer it, as opposed to jump down his throat because he wants to smear him as a terror apologist. So here's, if Piers Morgan would have shut up, here's what might have been said.
Won a free and fair election and came to power. But the military wing has been indulging from time
Sped up a little bit, but it'll slow down.
to time in terrorist acts. So is the military wing a terrorist organization?
The military wing is the element of a political movement, of a political party. And that military wing has committed terrorist acts in the past. But
you might have to slow this down. This is hard for
me.
Sorry.
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit. Here we go. We can do this.
6 won a free and fair election and came to power. But the military wing has been indulging from time to time in terrorist acts. So is the military wing a terrorist organization?
The military wing is the element of a political movement, of a political party. And that military wing has committed terrorist acts in the past. But I am reluctant to describe it as a terrorist organization. I would like to examine its actions case by case and conclude that if it attacks civilians, then that is a terrorist act. But if it attacks Israeli military targets or Israeli soldiers, then that I wouldn't call as terrorism. On the contrary, I would say that the people under occupation have the right to resist under international law, and Hamas is exercising the right to resistance to the Israeli occupation, and it's the only element within the Palestinian community that is resisting the occupation, because the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah is a collaborationist body. It collaborates with Israel in perpetuating the occupation. So the Palestinian Authority is a subcontractor for Israeli security on the West Bank. That is why it has lost legitimacy in the eyes of the Palestinian people.
And then just one more here from Shlaim on the same topic.
Palestinians chose the wrong bunch of people.
Here it is.
Now, in 2006 January, free and fair elections were held both in the West Bank and Gaza, and Hamas unexpectedly won a decisive victory over Fatah. But when Hamas formed the government, Israel refused to recognize it, and the United States and the European Union did the same. A year later, in November 2007, when Fatah and Hamas formed a government of national unity, overcoming their differences and getting together, you say Israel and the US plotted to undermine it. Was this Israeli attitude to Hamas justified by Hamas's 1987 position of wanting to eliminate Israel, or was Hamas changing its attitude, and did Israel fail to realize the change and thus miss another opportunity?
Political movements and movements of national liberation evolved, just as the PLO evolved from an absolute rejection of Israel to a much more moderate position that culminated in signing the Oslo Accord with Israel. Hamas is a political movement which has moderated its position since the Charter of 1988, which is a very dogmatic and very even anti-Semitic document. But once it was elected, Hamas seriously moderated its position. It formed a coalition government with Fatah. The government called for negotiations with Israel for a long-term ceasefire. Israel refused to recognize the Hamas-led government, and it engaged in economic warfare to break it down. And the United States and European Union, to their shame, supported Israel in this effort to recognize, to work with Hamas-led government. Now, the Western powers claim that they are there to promote democracy. And what happened there shows how hypocritical they were, because they say they want to promote democracy, but when the people chose the wrong bunch of, when the Palestinians chose the wrong bunch of people, they turned against Hamas. And there was indeed a plot which is...
Yeah, I mean, and so that sort of history, it's like, who like, you call for elections, you get pissed, you don't fix them, and you say, we're not going to deal with you as a body because of what your charter says. And the truth is that, look, there are probably some very anti-Semitic, even exterminationist people within Hamas. I imagine that's true. We know for a fact that those people exist within Israel as part of the Zionist government, because they say shit like that all the time. Like, they say the sort of stuff that like would be used as those people cannot negotiate. And here's the truth. You got to negotiate. You just got to. Diplomacy is the only way to do this, unless it is mass extermination. And that's nobody's going to accept that. There's one final thing here. This is from Hitchens, a piece. This is from when he's talking on his Letters to a Young Contrarian discussion. This is in November 11th of 2001. And he takes a question from somebody on, I mean, kind of a typical question you get from folks on Palestine.
Great. like your type of argument. You basically have intellectual discussion instead of a screaming argument. I'm a
precursor to some of these new guys. Yeah,
he's a libertarian.
I wonder if you could clarify a couple things for me. I believe Palestine was the entire area covering Israel and Jordan. I wonder if you could tell me at what point the Palestinians went to Jordan, and I realized they were kicked out when they blew up some passenger jets or something. And are you familiar with that?
Yes, I think more than you are, by the sound of it. I'm not sure. I don't. Well, go ahead.
Basically revolved around the Palestinians that were from Israel. I don't understand if there's 22 Arab states, why they have to take over Israel.
Well, there are 49 American states. If someone told you couldn't, apart from the one you're sitting in, if someone told you actually we would rather have your bit of Los Angeles for ourselves, from now on, this will only be this. You can only be a landholder or a householder here if you profess the, let's say, Muslim or Buddhist faith. Otherwise, get out. This bit's ours. You're happy to go to Colorado on that basis? I don't think so. And I think if you think about it, you wouldn't tell anyone else by treating them, their society or their country as disposable as that. The Palestinians do not feel that God gave the land to someone else and they therefore have to be flung out. And I completely agree with them. They've every right to resist that ridiculous proposal. By the way, could I just say, though, if you say you're a libertarian, though I must say you sound like an authoritarian where Palestinians are concerned. If you are a libertarian, you may find some nourishment in my book where I say that in the same breath as I mourn the decay of some of my socialist allegiances, that deep down, I mean, I've always been a sympathizer of the libertarian anti-statist point of view, and one of the things that attracted me to socialism in the beginning was the idea of the withering away of the state. Anyway, you might get some amusement out of it.
Keeps coming back to the book.
Mm-hmm.
I do like to just keep that second part in there because there's a lot of people that like to tell us in our comment section that Hitchens had no movement from the left to the right, and there he is just basically acknowledging that.
I mean, let's keep on the subject at hand, but I will just say it's because a lot of people only know Hitchens as like cool, epic YouTube debate guy, and spent no time reading any of his work, from the famous ones like that book, Letters to a Young Contrarian, to his earlier writings, where you can see very clearly, not only in what he's talking about, how he's talking about things, but when he says explicitly things like, yes, like the socialist movement no longer holds the sway over my heart as it once did. Right. Anyway, just we'll drop that. And let's, because I think that point is great that he makes there about, because that is such a cheap and nasty argument, by the way, that, it's like, well, why are they upset about this when there are people with a similar ethnicity or religion as them, that they could just come and live? I mean, it is truly such a bizarre, disgusting argument, frankly, to expect people to just pack up and move so that a bunch of other folks can come and take over their land. Insane, it's immoral, and I think the only way that you can get away with making these kind of things is to kind of decenter Palestinians as human beings, right? If they become an abstract kind of thing, it's like, well, then, why didn't they just leave? Well, if you think about it for a second, why would you leave your home? Why would you leave your family? Why would you leave your community? So other people can come in. I mean, it's a disgusting, proposal to put forward.
It's just it's so much racism, because it's like, why didn't, like, it's a Europe's sin. Why didn't they give them part of fucking Italy or Germany, right? Like, but they gave them a part of land that Europe controlled and wanted to colonize anyway. Like, just, and had a long-term plan for like, so that is, I just want to read one more piece from Shlaim, because I just to give people a little bit more guidance on that. As always, Mighty Israel, this is from 2009, I believe. An essay called I got it here, Israel's War Against Hamas, Rhetoric and Reality. As always, Israel claims to be a victim of Palestinian aggression, but the sheer asymmetry of power, which is a phrase that you you spend any time reading about this, you should come across. Otherwise, alarm bells should be ringing. But the sheer asymmetry of power between the two sides leaves little room for doubt as who is the real victim. This is indeed a conflict between David and Goliath, but the biblical image has been inverted. A small and defenseless Palestinian David faces a heavily armed, merciless, and overbearing Israeli Goliath. The resort to brute military force is accompanied, as always, by the shrill rhetoric of victimhood and a farrago of self-pity and overraid by self-righteousness. In Hebrew, this is known as the syndrome of Yorim Vebokim, shooting and crying. And Shlaim continues, to be sure, Hamas is not entirely innocent party in this conflict. Denied the fruit of its electoral victory and confronted with an unscrupulous adversary, it resorted to the weapon of the weak, terror. Militants from Hamas and Islamic Jihad kept launching Qassam rocket attacks against Israeli settlements near the border with Gaza until Egypt brokered a 6-month ceasefire last June. The damage caused by these primitive rockets is minimal, but the psychological impact is immense, prompting the public to demand protection from its government. Under the circumstances, Israel had the right to act in self-defense, but its response to the pinpricks of primitive rocket attacks was totally disproportionate. The figures speak for themselves. In 3 days after the withdrawal from Gaza, 11 Israelis were killed by rocket fire. On the other hand, in 2005 to 7 alone, the Israeli Defense Force killed 1,290 Palestinians in Gaza, including 222 children. The IDF developed a culture of impunity, right? And we know this stuff, but it's also like, you hear those numbers, and you look at the way that Israel reacts to a similar number, and, you know, we should just state, like, with regards to the attack on the music festival, it's looking now that the reports that Eyewitness said, which is that the IDF military helicopter responsible for at least some of those deaths, shooting indiscriminately into the crowd as it's trying to save people. But like this is what you always see is you'll see which is caught like, I mean, I just watched the Battle of Algiers last night, right? Talking about the FLN fighting France to get them to leave Algeria. There were terror attacks there, and we can condemn terror attacks as a tactic. And I think every group does. You look at like the way Mandela treats it in The Long Walk to Freedom, of course. Nonetheless, these sorts of structures will, if you want to produce terrorism, you colonize, or like in case of Israel, different as a settler colonial. But those sorts of relationships where you are displacing people and also introducing terror as a tactic yourselves, as we talked about with the Zionist project that bombed Jewish communities to get them to go to Israel, in addition to Palestinian communities to get them to leave Palestine. Like, we have to be able to be adult about this thing. And yes, there should be absolutely no violence at all. But it does need to be said, all the focus has been about condemning attacks on civilians. And I listened to the Hamas leadership talk to Ilan Thapar last night. And even they, and it doesn't matter how much you credit it, what they say publicly is that we told the freedom fighters, is their word, to attack IDF only. But things got out of hand, and also they didn't know, which is Haaretz is also confirming, they didn't know there was even going to be a music festival there. It was just there. And Israel was too busy, the IDF was too busy protecting land-grabbing settlers, literally, to be guarding the concentration camp. And that's why it got out of hand like that. So, but anyway, the Hamas is saying, we only attack IDF. And guess what? That's not only as a leftist, something for me to say that I think that's morally acceptable. That is acceptable under international law. Given Israel's obligations as an occupying force, which they have never met. Because one war crime that you can do as an occupier is transferring your population into the place you're occupying. And so so this conversation about condemning October 7th entirely, no. I condemn the attacks on civilians, and I condemn the taking hostages like babies and elderly people and just non-combatants. Because you know what? Also fucking Hamas does that. They do that publicly. Now, whether they really mean it, that's not really how I'm judging this, because Israel says a lot of things they mean and a lot of things they don't mean too. But one thing they also say is that everybody in Palestine is Hamas. Those children, we don't know if they're really children. that's why we can bomb way more civilians. And so this civilian thing, it's got to start going both ways. And when Piers Morgan is just trying to shout down Jeremy Corbyn, one of the most decent politicians that the English-speaking world has produced in my lifetime, it's super disgusting to me.
I think that's well said. I mean, what else to add there? I mean, I think one thing that is just exceptionally clear when you hear all of the demands for condemnation, from people like Piers or all across the board here. I'm sorry. There is one thing that is going on right now that it's right in front of you.
Right.
They're mass bombing millions of people, and to sit around here and to spend all of your time and not being able to, because what that condemnation is, the reason that they want to do that rhetorically is they want to say what they're doing in Gaza right now is justified because of this, right? And that's why they focus on it so much, because just outright saying what it is that they're saying, which is, I think that Israel has the right to bomb 3 million people, to starve, to cut off water, to cut off access to medicine, to make these people homeless and stateless. I think they have the right to do that. And, they don't. That's an incorrect position. But that's why there is this kind of media fixation on, instead of talking about what's happening right now, the crimes of Israel that are explicit and clear to everybody, it's going to be talking about October 7th forever, because that's the only kind of justification that they can come up with for the mass slaughter of civilians.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say before we leave, but I wanted to end on this Ilan Papy clip. And I think it puts in the context the new historical movement that Papy is, I think, maybe the foremost of. Shlaim is also. And there's a certain way that the Zionist historians try to say that Papy's bias, he admits it. And that's the only difference, is that he admits it. But it also gets you into why he might be closer to the truth than Israeli historians might get. And like the more I listen to these guys, and I just think like this is a tremendous amount of heroism that we've seen in the because what we talk about and why we talk about history so much on this program is that the way Papy talks about it is like this is actually influencing our activism and the political project, and I think it's kind of very clear why the interpretation that Papy brought to 1948 specifically helps interpret what's going on now in Gaza, which is not an anti-terror campaign, but an anti-Palestinian one.
One of the reasons all of us decided to look at 1948, apart from the reasons I've mentioned, was very practical. Under the secrecy laws of Great Britain, and to a certain extent of Israel and the United Nations, documents are declassified after 30 years. So the documents pertaining to 1948 were released in 1978. And I came to Oxford in 1980. So it made sense to go and look at the documents at which very few historians had researched before us. But something very interesting happened. There was quite a large group of Israeli historians who went to the British archives, to the Israeli archives, the American archives, the United Nations archives in the early 1980s. But only a very small number of them came out with a new insight about their own country's history. The vast majority of them said to themselves and to others, we haven't found anything in the documents which was new to us. And that was very surprising to me, because for me and for 3 or other 4 historians, which, as was mentioned, we were called later the new historians, what we saw in the documents totally changed our historical perspective on the past in general and on 1948 in particular. So why did the others not see what we saw? This question led me to venture into the area of historiography, of the philosophy of history, the question of subjectivity and objectivity in history. And it became clear to me that what influences the story you tell eventually as a professional historian is not just what you find in the documents. They're not just the facts. They have a lot to do with your moral position, your ideological orientation, the time in which you write, and your personality. They are all factors that influence the story you finally tell. In particular, I found out that this was important for how you treat a document in the archive. Do you treat the document as a reflection of the truth? Or is the document yet another interpretation of the truth? Do you trust the interpretation of an Israeli soldier in 1948? And do you trust an interpretation of Israeli soldier in 2018? If you have some doubts about their reports in 2018, you should have the same doubts about their reports in 1948. This is not a direct route to the truth. It's just another obstacle on the way to the truth. And apparently what happened was that a small group of Israeli historians did not only read in the document something that they didn't know about, for reasons that had to do with the contemporary reality in which they lived, suspected that what they read in the Israeli documents was not the truth, and deconstructed the documents in order to find out what they thought was the true story about Palestine. I will give you one example to show you how it works. If you go to the documents, you can see that the Israeli army orders the troops in 1948 to occupy the enemy bases, to destroy them, and to expel the enemy outside of the country. Now, if you are a bit open-minded, and you think in the 1980s about the occupation of the West Bank, if you think about the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982, then you say, wait a minute, what is this base? Is it a military bunker with outposts, with regular soldiers, armed soldiers, or is it a village? It turns out it's a village, and that the enemy troops are babies, women, old men, and some soldiers. But they are all together the enemy. And therefore, destroying the enemy base in the document, if you report verbatim the document, you could think that this was a conventional war in 1948. But if you are familiar with the reality in your own time, you understand that the base is a village or a neighborhood in a city. And therefore, the destruction of the base is the demolition of a village. And the killing of the enemy could be a massacre of civilians. That's why Israelis treated the Dahaya neighborhood in Beirut as an enemy base, but it's a civilian neighborhood. They treat the city of Gaza as a military base, but it's a civic space. And they treated the city of Jenin in 2002 as a military base. So it was very...
Yeah. And, you know, he's right about 48 and he's right about now. And it might be ideological why he's able to be right, but it's also ideological why the Zionist historians are wrong.
Yes, sir. I think that's right. And, you know, I mean, this is, you know, it's so funny that the cliche, Matt, that everybody knows about history and historiography in a certain way is,
right.
The Victor writes history, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a cliche. Everyone says that. And then people don't sort of actually let that influence their interpretations or how they view history or, you know, their investigations of it. Just like a cute thing to say randomly and then not have affect anything that you do in your life. And
it's almost like it's almost like people use it more in their personal lives. Like when I'm down, like, well, my haters, I'm getting to write the history or something.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, or it's used to support like insane conspiracy theories about, you know, Atlantis actually existed or something like that. You know, and like, you know, so the point is not to like, I mean, the point is to engage yourself in like the actual work that like he's talking about there, right? Where it's like you are looking at where information is coming from, you are having suspicions about the veracity of certain things, and using your knowledge of history and politics to be able to make claims. It's like, yeah, if I don't trust the Israeli military in 2018, yeah, probably not. I'm going to have similar feelings during the Nakba about how I'm seeing.
Exactly.
So
yeah, it's not just Bibi Netanyahu that got into and started the.
I'll tell you, that's something that I think is so dangerous and is you know, popular with a lot of like liberals particularly, but even some like leftists. It's like, oh, you know, this is Netanyahu, far right Netanyahu. He's Israel's Trump. You know, in the same way that when Trump was president, like all of the sins of America were sort of embodied in Trump. People were like, well, if we eradicate Trump, then there won't be a border wall. Well, as we see, you know, Biden's expanding the border wall right now.
Right.
Same thing with Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu is an avatar of a political project that is much deeper than just Bibi. You know, these kind of easy solutions or easy villains, I think sometimes help people get away with really sloppy political thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also like a limited sort of accountability where, you know, you can look at, okay, Bibi's gone. Let's start go back to zero. And it's like, well, there's a reason you got rid of Bibi once before, and then he came back despite everyone calling him a criminal. Like, what are we doing to address that sort of
There's
thing?
a reason that like former ministers of the government were putting out campaign commercials about spraying themselves with fascism cologne. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. And it's like, yeah, I hear things like about what's going to happen after. And it's like Biden's going to take a harsher stance against like extremist settlers in the West Bank. It's like the fucking whole structure. Like I don't want to paint every Israeli with a broad brush. We got a Majority Report listener who's like, I can't leave my house, but I live in the West Bank, and like I've basically come to realize my society is horrifying. Like obviously, right? But as far as like the leadership of like the settlements, like are you going to ban those guys? Like okay. Good luck. I mean, sure. I'll be honest. That's the one deployment of force, American troops, that I will take, is to stop Israeli settlers from taking more land and doing more violence. I think we probably are going to need to be there for a long ass time, regardless of what's going to happen. But
well, thank you for pulling together those clips, Matt. We'll be back this Tuesday with our main show. Appreciate all of y'all so much in this community, and have a good rest of your Sunday. We'll see you next week.
Peace.